think we've started. All right, so my name's Kat. I'm interviewing two of the ROGD mums who went down to Canberra to see a number of politicians. A very successful event. It was organised by Wendy Francis. She is the woman who put together a parliamentary inquiry in the, what does she call it? Conduct Inquiry into Affirmation Practices for Children Identifying as Transgender. Okay. And she organised payment, so we would really love to thank Wendy for her work. And I know this is an area that's, this fight that we're in is often full of tribalism, you know. We've got our little groups of feminists and anti-feminists, and we've got our groups of religious and non-religious and liberal and Labour and Greens and all the rest of it. But it's an area I think we have to say, on this thing that we care about kids. We can all agree we are fighting for kids, and the areas that we vehemently disagree on, let's fight on those another day. But on the things that we can agree on, let's fight together on this, because this impacts children, it impacts families, and impacts parents. So I'd like to introduce ROGD Mum 1 and ROGD Mum 2. Look, for their safety, I've asked them to not show their faces. We've had a number of people who've been got physical threats from the TRA. So I'd like to protect them as much as possible. And for that reason, we're not naming publicly also the politicians, because we, last year, speaking to a politician in Tasmania, the TRA had taken a photograph of her kids at school and threatened her if she didn't shut up. She can guess what's going to happen to her kids. So it's an area that it takes a lot of courage to speak up. So I'm really so thankful to you two and the other two mums who went down to Canberra. Just all power to you. So I thought we could start with, okay, can you tell us a bit, I suppose, let's start off with ROGD parent. Let's call the orange one ROGD Mum 1. I'll call you 1.
Okay.
What does ROGD mean? What does it stand for? What's an ROGD parent?
Rapid onset gender dysphoria. Once upon a time, children used to sort of show that they were or claim to be the opposite gender when they were quite young. It was something that was observed quite young, and then it's a fairly new phenomenon that a researcher called Lisa Littman did a lot of study, and she termed rapid onset gender dysphoria because it means literally sometimes seemingly overnight, sometimes within the space of a couple of months, your once normal gender conforming child suddenly decides that they are not their gender that matches their birth sex, that they're actually another gender.
Okay, all right. So, Mum 2, why do you feel it's important to see the politicians face to face?
Well, certainly from my own experience and experience of many of the parents I've got to know over the last 4 years since I've been involved in this, that writing letters to medical associations and politicians has resulted in absolutely dead ends. No one answers letters. No one wants to acknowledge the problem. So, you know, myself personally, I've had sent hundreds of letters trying to raise awareness of this problem, as have many, many other parents I know. So to take it to Parliament face to face seemed to be the only way to get people's attention.
Yeah. Okay. Overall, guys, what was the reception of the politicians, do you think?
They were all genuinely concerned, actually. You know, some that you might think would have been a little bit more against our sort of point of view. Once I actually sat and listened to the stories, because the problem is even the media, you know, social media, definitely everything is portrayed very one-sidedly at the moment. I mean, given like ABC, you know, has just been up lately for being, you know, very one-sided with their conversation. the general public only really hear one side of the story. They don't hear the other sides. They hear the happy endings, but, you know, for the few happy endings and the poster childs, there's a lot that aren't happy endings. And, you know, it still doesn't talk about, you know, the different issues that parents face when this, you know, suddenly happens in their lives.
Okay. What did you? So you spoke across the board to?
We did.
All the political parties. What were the political parties that you spoke to?
Not all of them, but a broad range of them. You know, from Labor, Liberal, One Nation, Nationals. There was probably more. We spoke to quite a few, and you know, there was a lot of concerns across the board. Even some sort of personal stories, you know, that people touched on a little bit, even themselves, you know, that they've suddenly become aware. So, it was good to be able to talk to everyone. I mean, everyone was respectful and listened, which, you know, is amazing when, you know, when Mum 1 was sort of Mum 2 was saying that, you know, we've written hundreds of letters. I mean, we have written hundreds of letters. You know, we've taken phone calls, you know, but I think it's different to actually go and sit in front of someone and share your pain and your experiences. And I mean, you know, a lot of the politicians are parents themselves. So I think, you know, you can touch on that personal level better than you can with a letter or an email.
So, Mum 2, was there any people that you met that actually had a personal experience in their life, in their circle of friends or their family at all?
Oh, yes, there was. People were very aware of the influence of gender ideology through education, particularly because suddenly we have, you know, one of them spoke of knowing that there were friendship groups of young girls from a very, very young age declaring sexual orientations such as bisexual or asexual or this or that. And this has only come from one place, and it's come from indoctrination through education systems and the shock that they saw these friendship groups of girls trying to identify out of being female, and the tragedy of that. And another person also spoke of knowing young people who were declaring a transgender identity and being stunned and shocked, and where has this all come from? Acknowledging that 15 years ago this would not have been happening.
Okay.
The other thing that was notable was the mention that the people that they knew, that the children who had identified suddenly as the opposite sex, that they'd rewritten history, which is something that people don't seem to understand. That a lot of the time, you know, to match their new persona, it's kind of ironic that they sort of rewrite their own history and their family's history, actually, to try and make it fit and work into the story that they're sort of being pushed into believing.
Yeah. Okay. So overall, what was the kind of emotional responses? Did you get shocked? Did you get tears? Did you get disbelief? You get dismissed? What were kind of what were kind of experiences that you got from some of these people?
We got a full range, really. What surprised me was that some of the people who are more vocal in promoting these ideas didn't really know the basics of the whole transgender intricacies, which was quite surprising. You know, asking if surgeries were reversible and, you know, things like that after a vaginoplasty, for example, you know, whether it was reversible. And that really surprised me for, I mean, you know, politicians that are running the country, I guess you expect a higher level of awareness of these matters. But obviously, you know, they've stuck to more the political thing than the actual intricacies of the details sort of thing, which surprised me.
Can I comment that when I was meeting up with one of the politicians here in New South Wales, he said the same thing, that you talking to these politicians, you're going to get total ignorance, He said that they tend to, like, for example, here in New South Wales with ACON, it's had such a good past history that there's just a trust, particularly at the administrative level, who are always there. Politicians may come and go, but the admin and or the political daily runnings of the place who do that, they've had that great reputation, and they've just trusted. So, so he said that's what you're going to be facing. It's going to be new to them. They're not going to know.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, most of them had sort of knew a little bit because it's been sort of out in the news a little bit sort of lately. I mean, if this had happened, 4 years ago, they might have known a lot less probably because there really was nothing about it in mainstream media. But, I mean, there wasn't very many that were completely oblivious. Some admitted it to not being in their general area, but they didn't realise, I mean, a lot sort of thought, no, you can't do that until you're over 18, and were quite surprised when they were told that in fact you could.
Yeah, it's in the laws. It's in
Yes.
the policies.
Yes.
Any tears?
We had some tears. Yeah, we did have some tears. I mean, amongst the parents too. I mean, it's a relief to be trying to, to be listened to by someone who's, seemingly, in a sort of higher position than we were. After so many years of struggling to be heard, I mean, it was amazing to be able to have someone actually pay attention to us, even for a little while, somebody to acknowledge what's happened and things,
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I really am. You guys have just been amazing. The amount of letters you've written and the work you've done. And I know, like, most of the stuff is behind the scenes. The people that you talk to, the people who you get frantic calls from, and who's got no one else to talk to. I mean, there's no support. The detransitioners who don't have any support from their networks. So just phenomenal work. Just phenomenal
Thank you.
Work. Anger. What I want to hear is anger.
I mean, I think there's always anger. There's always anger at how, parental rights have been taken away. The way that, I mean, even, not being able to find out your child's medical records from, Medicare status and stuff from the time they're 14. I mean, okay, there might be the odd situation where that would be appropriate, but in a general family life, a 14-year-old is still well and truly under, parental care, and, to not even be able to sort of access their medical records or vaccination records and stuff without the child's permission seems, really a bit insane actually, because, if something goes wrong, I mean, you hear horror stories of kids playing up and things in the media. And the first response is, where were the parents? Well, it's like, we're here. The parents are here, but we're just not allowed to be able to step in and things. There's a very much an overreach into, parental rights now, and it makes it very, very difficult to parent.
And I think that there was shock at how destructive this has been to the family unit.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because what we've seen is that the framing of parents wanting to put a stop to young women having their breasts removed, or young boys getting, orchiectomy, or that removal of their testicles. Yeah. When they do the right thing as a parent, saying no, that it's been considered child abuse, and we've seen, and we know, and we've heard, because we've spoken to these people, that they've had their children taken away by the state.
Yes.
I mean, and politicians don't seem to understand that this is happening underneath their nose.
Yeah.
Well, they've been told now, they were certainly told, and we let them know that, and I could see the shock in their faces of this complete overreach, abolition of the rights of parents to parent their children, and the terrible, terrible destruction because of all of us being so, having such damage to our families.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about your story that you can share? Is that okay?
Well, the typical thing, a young person who suddenly announces saying they're a different sex, and when you're calling for caution and perhaps an investigation of mental health history and slow down. We don't need to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Let's take a look at this and see what's really behind it, and being undermined by the medical profession and being basically ridiculed in front of your own child, having your autonomy, your relationship with your child destroyed because you were painted to be the evil person, because you didn't want to rush into something that you thought was a very, very serious life-changing event, and that you thought caution was much more suitable and, proper psychiatric and psychology. And the terrible undermining by the medical profession, who have basically involved themselves in what is an adolescent and young people's fad. It's clearly a social contagion. It didn't exist 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, wake up to what is happening around the world, and the spread of the internet and mass media promoting this as something glamorous, normal, attainable, and by normal I mean it's not normal to chop off healthy body parts. It's not normal to take hormones that are going to irreversibly change you and shorten your life and cause catastrophic problems to your endocrine system and so many other things. I mean, that's just not normal to do that. And so why on earth has the medical profession involved themselves in such a destructive pattern of behaviour?
Can I answer that question?
Yes.
Well, one of the reasons is this is just business. With watchful waiting, because I'm a member of Active Watchful Waiting Australasia. With watchful waiting, which is that exploratory approach to a young person, you look at everything that's going on in their life. So that means that there's one-on-one. They are talking to psychologists or psychiatrists, and that's the only way people who are getting money is like psychologists, psychiatrists. And once they are cured, they're out of the system. It usually happens once they get through puberty, and they align themselves to reconcile with their sex, because it's a horrible time, puberty. You don't know if you're Arthur or Martha, particularly if you've got mental health comorbidities like depression, high anxiety, which these kids do, or maybe you're a proto-LGB kid, you're non-gender, non-conforming, you probably most likely be gay, maybe. And then you've got autism and all the rest of it, and those are the target groups. But once you go through puberty, most of them, up to 98%, are fine with it. So there's no ongoing revenue stream, because they're out of the system, they're out of the money-making system. And if you wanted to, like in these days, people look for solutions, a one-size-fits-all solution that's scalable. You can market on social media, you can get large corporates involved and do what's called contact marketing, that they'll sell the brand for you to get people money your way and the rest of it. You can't do that with watchful waiting, because it's one-on-one individual care. There's no one-size-fits-all. But gender-affirming care, that horrible name that suggests it's caring, that's different. What you do is you instead with that business model, what you do is instead of saying, okay, we're not going to reconcile you to your sex. No, what we're going to say is you are in fact in the wrong body. That's the problem. You're in the wrong body. So we can fix it with a whole product line of drugs and hormones, and we can get you up with specialist clothing, and and we'll make everybody call you the right gender, etc. And so the branding of that, of course, is gender identity. We can do narratives, sympathetic narratives on social media. You've got, what's her name? What's that girl's name? Who turned into a boy that everyone likes, Elliot now. Used to be Ellen, that person. You can have influencers, social media influencers. You can do contact marketing. You can use things like Wear It Purple, that's underneath ILGA, that can get people to do things like waving flags and wearing purple and speaking, doing diversity inclusion orders. All that kind of stuff is selling the brand, and it's scalable. Once a person's on this pathway, medical pathway, then they're on it for life, because you've got recurrent revenue stream from the drugs and the hormones. So you've got one way that you don't have ongoing money from the kid, and you've got another way that you can, at the very minimum, around $60,000 to $250,000 per head. Which does the medical industry prefer? And that's being cynical, but what we've seen it. So like, they've answered it, you know. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, they've pitched it. What people don't understand is organisations at ILGA do a lot of the training for their members, like ACON, we're at Purple Equality Australia. And one of the training was to frame this, that if you allow the suffering of this child, this autistic child or this person with anxiety, you are evil and corrupt and, you know, and horrible. And the suffering is caused because they're in the wrong body. And that's why you get caring people who get on board with this, because that's what they're told repeatedly in the news and in the media, etc. That if you are not on board to stop this, but no caring person, if you've got a suicidal kid and they lie and they say they're going to commit suicide, which is not true, but no caring person, if they've got a suicidal girl, you don't cut their breasts off. You don't castrate an autistic boy. You know, you don't have you go to a person suffering an I never say this word right. What is it? Anorexia?
Anorexia.
I never get that word right. You know, you don't do gastric banding on that kind of person. You know, you treat them as an individual.
That's the thing that, you know, lots of all of the parents experience, you know, that they start sort of explaining to the doctors or the therapists that they're concerned, and all of a sudden you're branded as abusive, and you get the line, you know, better a live son than a dead daughter. But the thing is, if you've got a daughter who decides to transition, I mean, you don't get another son. They're not a son. They're like they're like a fake son. They're like like just a completely fake version of the son. There's nothing son about them, you know. Just because they're wearing boy clothes doesn't mean and their voices have deepened and they've got flat chests, doesn't mean suddenly that they're a boy.
Yeah, look, what was that? Look, what's the next step? Well, one thing I think comes clearly, you've got to see people. After your meetings, what we did is we sent them info pack on the medical side of things. It was, we took the original stuff that was ticked off by Dr. Michael Biggs and Philip Morrison, etc. And we also gave them information on the business side of things, why this is so successful and how people get hijacked into this. Because it very much works like, I hate to say it, works like a cult.
Yes.
All right, yeah. I didn't want this to go too long, because I really wanted to get to the point. But one of the things that we're going to do is we are going to make scripts for other people so that they can actually talk to politicians. We've done it with self-ID, and this year the ladies have been going around have talked to 29 politicians so far, and it makes a big difference on that topic. But we'll definitely put something together for anyone who wants to talk directly to their local politician, because this is really...
I think that's the thing. Yeah, that's going to be the way that, you know, we've got to have people who are concerned about this, whether they've got children involved or not, to actually go with information that's factual, not emotive, not political, and actually go and speak to the people so that they can understand where we're coming from, because unfortunately, you know, mainstream media isn't promoting this on our side. It's definitely pushing, you know, how wonderful it is, but, you know, it's not always wonderful. And I mean, you know, you can go on to different detransitioner boards like on Reddit and have a look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of detransitioners who say, you know, it was the worst thing they ever did, and, you know, how they wish they could turn back time, how they're so, you know, like they go from being angry at anyone who affirmed them to being ashamed about what they put their parents through because their parents tried to stop them. And, you know, we don't want that. I mean, I don't think any parent wants to see a child go through, you know, or a young person go through and make those sort of massive mistakes. I mean, that's why we all are here to try and parent, to prevent children making mistakes. I mean, we've been there, we've made our own mistakes, you know, we've understood the consequences, but these kids don't understand.
Yeah.
No, they're consequences like we've never ever seen before.
That's right.
Ladies, what else? I'm old-fashioned, I say ladies. What else do you feel that people need to know?
Just that the numbers are rapidly growing.
Yeah.
You know,
Can I just comment? I looked on Reddit
Yes.
this month, it was 41k. I had looked last month, it was 35. It's exponentially increasing. And generally the rule of thumb is once someone is trans, when they detransition, it's usually between 5 to 6 years. Sometimes as late as 10 years, but 5 to 6 years is when it kind of like, this has not made me any happier, actually, you know.
I mean, we've gone from a society where, you know, back in sort of the 80s and 90s, if, you know, learn to love yourself, love the body that you're in, to all of a sudden, if you don't quite fit in, you know, removing body parts is the answer to everything. And it's just not. It's just so dangerous.
Yes, and people are being pushed into boxes rather than escaping from boxes.
That's right.
You look at the gender non-conformity that was in the 70s and 80s, the fabulous gender-bending people that were around, and nobody cared, and everyone rejoiced that. And we have come so far backwards, and to be telling children that their tastes, their preference for stereotypes actually influence their biological sex is a lie. It's a wicked, wicked lie. And that needs to be exposed, and it needs to be stopped, because the harm that it's causing, the long-term harm, the catastrophic damage being done to young people's bodies is criminal.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I think we'll leave it there. If you guys are okay with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But next steps is we are going to follow up with, I'm not going to mention the politician's name, as I'll repeat again, because I don't want them attacked, as have other politicians been attacked. We will follow up with them though after the kits, etc., and we will make scripts for other people, and we are offering training. This is Active Watchful Waiting Australasia. God, this long name. AWWA. We'll do training. We'll help set up all the appointments. But the only way really that you make a difference with this is you need to see people face to face. It doesn't matter what documents you've got, what letters you've got, what website material is. For them to be able to use that, they have to see it. And they can hear it in your voice, and they can see it in your eyes, and they have to know that this is real.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat.